broadcast. My name is Katie Matheson. I'm the communications director here at Alliance for a Better Utah. And today we have Jason Groth with us from ACLU's Campaign for Smart Justice. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we've had you on before. We had you on during the legislative session.
Yep.
But this is kind of a work in progress. So we're going to probably have you back today, probably have you back in the future. We're partnering with you guys on a couple debates, which is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fun. I mean, informative.
I had a good time.
Yeah, I think it's fun. Great. Okay, so to start off, first of all, I'm going to say remember to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Better Utah. So that's Instagram, Facebook, obviously, and Twitter. And be sure to click Get Reminder on our videos when you see them pop up so that you can be reminded when we go live. So before we dig in, we're going to play a game called Is This Real Life? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a headline, a news headline, and you have to decide whether it's fake or real. Okay?
Let's do it.
So I'm going to turn my computer so you can't see the answers. All right. And usually I totally give it away by laughing too hard, so let's see if I can keep a straight face. First one. Philadelphia zookeeper gets locked in overnight after monkey steals his keys. Is that real or fake?
Real.
No, that's fake.
Mm.
We all want it to be real, though. There was a real one a couple weeks ago about a baboon that got like a 55-pound drum and escaped from its enclosure, and that one was real. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility. Okay, next one. Peacocks can't handle their reflections, are attacking luxury cars in Canada.
I want that to be real. I'll say real.
It is real.
Yeah?
Yes. Apparently, there's a whole issue with these peacocks attacking their reflection in these dark cars because they think it's a real peacock, and it's a serious issue. All right, next one. Florida police officer spots three-legged alligator crossing road during patrol. Welcome to Florida.
That sounds Florida. True.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I think every week we have a Florida alligator story. So. All right, next one. Astrophysicists hypothesize that the time span of a year is actually shorter than it used to be.
I'll say false.
Man, you're good. That is fake. And it's too far out. I wouldn't be able to wrap my mind around it even. All right, two more. Senator in Vermont missed an important meeting after a new aide accidentally gave him Ambien.
True?
False.
Okay.
You never know with Ambien these days. Ambien has all sorts of side effects. All right, last one. Jersey Shore real estate sign washes up in France years after Hurricane Sandy.
True.
That is true. And now they're calling
weird.
themselves a global business because their sign washed up in France. All right, excellent. You did very well on that one. All right, so now let's get down to business, the serious stuff. So let's talk about, first let's get into Campaign for Smart Justice, what it is, what you guys do, and then let's talk about the debate that we had last night. So first give us an introduction and also about yourself.
Yeah. So Jason Groth, Smart Justice Coordinator at the ACLU of Utah. In a previous life, not too long ago, I was a public defender in Colorado. And so I was doing public defense up until January this year and then started here in Utah. So it's kind of my background with criminal justice. The Campaign for Smart Justice is a 50-state effort by the National ACLU to try to do criminal justice reform in each state. The main goals of this campaign are to look at racial disparities and combat those disparities in the criminal justice system, and also to work on de-incarceration. So we have a mass incarceration problem that spans the entire United States, and so we're trying to reduce that by 50%. And then in Utah, so each state implements the program according to the state needs. And so the way we're looking at it here in Utah is on parole reform and parole reform. So essentially the entry point and the exit point of the justice system.
Okay, cool. And you said that's unique to Utah specifically?
There's overlap with other states, but that's how we're taking on those goals locally.
Great. Okay, so last night we hosted our first debate together. So our ABU Education Fund and Campaign for Smart Justice, we hosted a debate down over in Wasatch County for the Republican primary for county attorney. And can you give us kind of an overview of what happened? For our audience, we live tweeted. There's a Facebook Live video of it, but we'll kind of give you a recap from our end of things. So, can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so interestingly, for the national campaign, the Campaign for Smart Justice, this was the first Republican primary that the Smart Justice program was involved in.
Wow,
So,
well done. That's awesome.
yeah, thank you. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And, one of those reasons might be because it seems like ACLU is sponsoring it, and so people might be a little skeptical when you're looking at a Republican primary,
Great.
what our role is. And so we don't actually endorse candidates. We do issue advocacy. So our issue advocacy is related to our goals with criminal justice reform, but we don't pick candidates or give ratings or anything like that. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how that dialogue or conversation looks at the county level. And so here we had four primary candidates. We had the incumbent Scott Sweat, and then we had three different challengers. So Kit Kozakowski, Tyler Berg, and Tyler Dow.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a moderator, Craig Blake from the Disability Law Center. And so the way the format kind of worked is that the candidates would submit their topics of interest. Mr. Blake would then craft those questions off those topics, send back the topics, but not the questions before the debate started. And then the candidates had time to kind of prep for those general Q&A areas.
Cool. And what did you think? How do you think the conversation went last night? I mean, without, obviously you were not endorsing candidates, but what were your general thoughts? I mean, to kind of frame it for our audience, having such a crowded primary is fairly interesting, especially for a county attorney seat, at least to me. And Wasatch County in particular is one of the fastest growing counties in Utah, which is remarkable considering Utah is one of the fastest growing states in the country. So all of these things combined makes it a very interesting, I think, probably conversation. And so from that angle, did you have any thoughts about the debate last night?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you have four candidates in a smaller county vying for the same seat. Going through such growth in that county. So I'd never been to Heber City before. When we were driving in, I was really kind of surprised at how much new construction development was going on. It's a really pretty area, really pretty part of the state. And I can see why it attracts a lot of people to go there. And so you can definitely see, like literally just driving down Main Street, see that this community is doing really well. And so when you look at the county attorney race, you realize that the county attorneys generally have an impact on everybody in the county. But when you're looking at Wasatch County, you're going to see how much impact this county attorney is going to have over the next 4 years during their term, potentially the next 4 years after that, because I think the growth rate's like 5%, something like that. It's pretty extraordinary. And so then you just have a wide impact. So a lot of the discussion was looking at like, well, what do we do both in the civil side, right? Because county attorneys, they handle two areas, right? They have a hat that they wear that is their civil side. They also have a hat that they wear that's their criminal justice side, or the prosecutor's hat. And so a lot of that discussion hit on both of those aspects in different ways. And so I think a lot of that discussion was interesting to hear how the challengers were looking at both of those issues, and in particular prosecutions in the county in relation to the growth, and then how the incumbent had looked at those issues currently in office. And so I think that the discussion was really kind of unique to Wasatch County in a way, because we do have four primary candidates, and this is that primary is going to decide the next county attorney, because there's no other challengers from another party. And so whoever wins that primary, right, is going to be the next county attorney. Right. And that is something that actually is pretty common throughout Utah, being kind of a one-party state, that when we're looking at these elections, is that a lot of these are actually decided in the primary. And so that's going to be in Utah throughout the state, 4 counties will be decided at the primary level.
Wow, okay. So
Sorry to interrupt. We do have a comment. I don't know if you guys would like to address it.
Let's hear the comment.
It's from Robert Walton. He says, justice reform needs to be done in zero-sum fashion. That is, money needs to be taken directly from jails and prisons, and police budgets for social and alternative programs. Do you guys have any comments on that?
Actually, can you read that again on the mic?
Yeah.
Just so our audience can be sure to hear it.
Grab that from you. Sorry,
That's Kyle. That's
I'm Kyle. I'm
the voice in the background.
The voice in the background. I'm like the Wizard of Oz. Robert Walton had a statement that I wanted to bring up and see if you guys had any thoughts on. He says, so-called crime justice reform needs to be done in a zero-sum fashion. That is, money needs to be taken directly from jails and prisons and police budgets for social and alternative programs. So just curious if you guys had any thoughts on that.
Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it goes to kind of the policy behind these reform efforts. And I'm not necessarily sure if that's the case, that you need to pull budgets from as opposed to supplement budgets towards. And I think that kind of gets to the issue about educating voters and educating the public to support reform efforts, so you don't have to worry about detracting from other budgets and to supplement these alternatives to incarceration, for example, where if the voter support really supports these initiatives, then hopefully we can get the policy changes to get the funding through the state to look at these programs and fund them properly. Because when you look at a lot of long-term effects from having funded like alternatives to incarceration, you can actually save some money. And so a lot of these initial investments can result in savings down the road. And so how that looks policy-wise, that's, a pretty complex question. But it's really interesting, one, to think about how we actually can fund these programs and these efforts.
Yeah. And any more questions, please feel free to ask or follow-up comments. That's a really great answer. And I mean, certainly more complicated than one that would even be decided at a primary debate for county attorneys. I mean, that's a legislative, budget type situation. But again, feel free to comment back. In the meantime, let's talk about the national organization Campaign for Smart Justice. On their website kind of starts the conversation by saying, who is the most powerful person in the criminal justice system, or who are the most powerful people in the criminal justice system? And it sounds like a lot of people assume it's judges. And it looks like the answer that Campaign for Smart Justice is giving is, in fact, it's local prosecutors. And so can you speak to that and the importance? Because you say for example, the Wasatch County attorney, whomever that is, they will have an impact on everybody in the county. And so can you kind of play that out for people who may or may not understand the real impact that prosecutors have?
Sure. And also, too, when we think, I guess I should preface that when we think about how it impacts the community, it impacts your county, right? Your county prosecutor, like I said, wears those two hats. But with prosecutions, you don't just prosecute people that are from your county. You also prosecute people that are passing through your county or maybe visiting. And so that could be somebody else in Utah. It could be somebody in a neighboring state, like Colorado, Wyoming. And so prosecutions don't just prosecute the people that are in their county, but it could be potentially anybody that's in their jurisdiction. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. But as far as the kind of the power of the prosecutor in the courtroom, as you said, a lot of people think that it's the judge, right? Because the judge seems like a very powerful figure when you go into a courtroom. But actually, and this is, definitely what the national campaign is talking about, I've seen happen in the courtroom as a criminal defense attorney, where the judge is more of a referee. Make sure that everybody's following the rules, right? Rules of evidence, rules of law, and making determinations on those rules, right? When the lawyer is kind of getting to the nitty-gritty about them. But for the most part, when a criminal prosecution occurs, the judge has a backseat. The judge doesn't really take part in plea negotiations. The judge makes determinations on bail if somebody can get released from custody, but the argument comes from the prosecutor, right? Whether or not they're a flight risk, whether or not they're a danger to the community, and the judge has a role at sentencing as well, right? So that's kind of where the judge's wheelhouse is. But the prosecutor, right, decides what charges to charge a person with, right? So when somebody's arrested, they review the case file, decide what charges to charge somebody with. Like I said, they make the bond arguments and ask for a person to stay in custody or be released from custody. They look at the plea agreement and then the outcomes from the plea agreement. So they kind of craft a contract with either the person accused of the crime or with their defense attorney to determine the outcomes. They make the sentencing recommendations. And so the prosecutor really drives how the case is going to be handled and where it ends up. The defense attorney, aptly named, is on defense the whole time. So there's some control. Like the most leverage you get as a defense attorney is saying you can take a case to trial, right? If you have good facts and the laws behind you, and that's kind of your leverage. But most cases end up in plea deals, right? Just because the way the criminal justice system is set up, it's kind of slow, marauding. Cases take a long time to get to trial. You have 6 months for a speedy trial, but that can be delayed for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of other factors like bail that would maybe force somebody's hand, right? Even if somebody professes that they're innocent, if they can't get out of custody, that's a huge problem because you can sit in custody until your trial and have your day in court, but if you can't get out, right, if you can't afford your bail, you can't go to your job, you can't go to your job, you can't make your money to pay your rent, you can't pay your rent, you lose your house, right? Then you lose all your belongings while you're waiting. That's just affecting the person that's in custody, let alone their family that they're supporting as well. And so there's a lot of what the prosecutor does that really has a huge impact on the individual.
Okay. So it looks like around the country, again, according to the Campaign for Smart Justice national website, it sounds like they've been fairly excited about a couple of attorneys that have been elected, because it is an elected position, right? Who believe in this is a different conversation, criminal justice reform. And so my question is, I guess, what does a prosecutor who is maybe we would call stereotypically tough on crime versus a prosecutor who believes in criminal justice reform, what do those two things, like what do those two hypothetical people look like, and what's the difference as it's felt in the community?
So the tough on crime sort of mentality is really what led to our mass incarceration issue right now. The United States has 5% of the world's total population, but we have 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So 5 times more, right? Looking at our population. And so that sort of mentality is lock them up, throw away the key, we're going to keep our community safe. If somebody is incarcerated, then they can't get out to hurt somebody, right? But the problem with that is that if you look at that, you're not going to be seeing a lot of alternatives to incarceration or sort of justice practices, or looking at ways to get people resources when they are incarcerated to transfer back out into the community. I mean, the reality of the situation is that 95% of people that are incarcerated are going to be back in our communities, right? And so lock them up and throw away the key doesn't really work, because that's usually not how it ends, right? Most people that are incarcerated are going to be back out in the community. And so if you don't give people the resources that they need to deal with mental health issues, drug addictions, working on employment, right, housing, when people get out and transition back into the community, you're going to look and see high recidivism rates, right? Because you don't have that support. So because you have to think about like what's actually changed when somebody's incarcerated, and if it's just that they sat in a cell and we're around other people that are incarcerated for a period of time, then they get out with no resources and they just say good luck, like you shouldn't come back here. That's not a great outcome, right? So when we think about smart justice, reform-minded prosecutors, it's not like saying the other side is dumb justice, right? It's more like thoughtful justice. Like let's give it a good think and see some solutions we can get, right? How do we reduce recidivism rates, right? And so kind of that goes back to what I was talking about with bail, that if somebody can get out and get a job, then you are kind of putting somebody in a huge disadvantage to actually reintegrate back into the community. So if we're looking at alternatives to incarceration, we'd be looking at maybe the more appropriate would be something like a house arrest, where somebody can be on a monitor, go to work, take care of their family, and then once they're done with their time in house arrest, then they can easily transition back into the community because they're kind of already there, right? But if somebody is in jail for a period of time and then they lose all those resources and they have to start over again, it's much harder. And also, if you look at the cost savings too, I think it's in Salt Lake County, it costs half as much to do something like that, like a house arrest, where somebody can go to work. And then also you're going to see that those recidivism rates aren't going to be as high for those people as well. So you can be reform minded and also have community safety in mind.
Yeah, and it sounds like it almost requires more creative and compassionate ways of thinking about the issue. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one of the issues that just the general public faces when we're thinking about criminal justice reform is that seeing somebody who's in the system as a person, right? Um, and so that can be really hard because it's really easy just to think, well, it's not my community, that's not my problem, right? Like, I don't want that person in my community. But because of such high incarceration rates in the United States, it's usually you're not very far removed from somebody that's brushed in with the law, whether that's like a traffic ticket or a DUI or offenses that are a bit more common. Those are community members, right? And a lot of people don't really want to see it that way. And so I think with prosecutors, just like everybody else in the public, is seeing these individuals as people that actually can be really good resources in the community once they get back out, or if they stay in through alternative incarceration. And so I think just hearing those stories about people who've been in prison get out and then get invested in the community and helping out people that are transitioning out again, I think that's a really common story in any state, especially here in Utah.
Yeah, it sounds like you really make the case for the far-reaching reach of a prosecutor and the impact that they can have on the community in terms of community safety and community compassion and all these types of things. Are there unique issues that face a community that is growing so much, like in Wasatch County, like in Utah in general, in terms of compassionate criminal justice reform?
I mean, I think one of the concerns is that when you see growing communities, that you're going to see that the ratio of, like, I guess, jail bed space to the population is going to get smaller. And so the discussions start getting into the area where it's like, well, do we need more, like, prison space? Do we need more county jail space? And I think those issues really need to be looked at closely. Is there a need for that based on how we previously thought about criminal justice? Or are there other ways we don't have to build new facilities? Because generally what happens is when you build new facilities, you just fill them up. Right? That's what's going to happen.
Right.
So even if you have more bed space, that's going to be full at some point. But if you start thinking about other ways to deal with a lot of these issues that don't involve incarceration, then those sort of problems aren't going to create another financial burden for a growing community. And then you can use those tax dollars elsewhere, right? And also you don't have to pay for as many people managing those facilities either, right? So I think that's a really interesting question where it's like, how does growth impact the criminal justice system? And I think it's just because you have a bigger population that you think you need to have maybe more officers, more prosecutors, or more jail bed space. But I think there's opportunity to actually look at how that growth can be the moment where you can start changing those policies and start looking at reform issues and implementing them, so you don't have to worry about continuing this mass incarceration that we've been dealing with, even in Utah.
Sounds like there is actually a pretty solid argument then for smart criminal justice reform actually being a smart fiscal choice for a community. And as we're continuing to grow, something like this would be a great opportunity for us to, be smart about how we redo our criminal justice and then use that money to put towards other things, which would be great because we could use it, like our schools.
Yeah, that'd be
our
sweet.
Schools could definitely use it. So let's talk about what we have coming up. So we had the primary debate last night, and then we are going to be partnering and doing a couple more debates at the end of the year for the general election, right?
That's correct.
And those are still being solidified, but audience, you can look for those probably September-ish.
Yeah,
right?
Mid-September is what we're looking at.
Mid-September, okay. So those will be those are two other county. We're looking, right? Other counties?
Correct.
Yeah. We're not quite sure which ones, so we'll put a hold on announcing that yet, right?
Yeah,
okay.
But stay tuned.
Right, stay tuned. They're on the edges of their seats, just waiting. Yeah, just waiting to hear what's next. All right, so how can, is there anything else you'd like to say? on this topic or on Utah, or I mean, you can make other announcements if you really want to.
Sure. Yeah, I just think that it's really important to understand the role of the county attorney, and a quick distinction that there's district attorneys and county attorneys. And so, like I said, county attorneys wear two hats, civil side and criminal side. District attorneys, like here in Salt Lake County, we just have district attorneys, right? So generally you see that with larger counties. And I believe in Utah, that is the only district attorney position in the state. So, and they just do just prosecution. That's it.
Okay. What's the civil side
And
for
so-
a county attorney?
So a lot of it, and that's like not necessarily my wheelhouse, but I can speak to that a little
Yeah.
bit. So a lot of that is just advising the county on different legal issues and defending the county in lawsuits.
Oh, okay.
And so, but it's like huge area of different parts of law. But that's kind of the main gist of it.
Okay, great. All right, so how can people get involved with Campaign for Smart Justice?
Pay attention to our Twitter, Instagram, and website. So you can find us at @SmartJusticeUT on Twitter. Instagram is smart_justice_Utah. And our website is smartjusticeutah.org. And so we'll have updates on activities that are going on. So if you look at our history, you can see that we were talking about the upcoming debates. We had a questionnaire that was released recently. So you can go to our website, go to prosecutorial reform tab, scroll down. We have a candidate tracker, so you can get your local candidates' contact information. If they responded to the survey, you can see their responses. So we hit 3 topic areas: mass incarceration, racial disparities, and prosecutorial oversight. So if you kind of want to get a feel about like what we're doing, the work that we're doing, you can find that there. We also have a calendar on the front page with upcoming events.
Great. So I encourage all of our watchers to go and check out that candidate questionnaire, because that's going to be incredibly interesting. And you've sent it out to the whole state, or is it just... I know you did Wasatch County.
Everybody.
You did everybody. Okay.
Anybody that filed for candidacy, we sent it out to. I know that some people are not in those races, some have dropped, or things have changed, or the primary is going to shift that too. But everybody who had filed for candidacy was sent the questionnaire. And then the deadline for that was a couple of weeks ago. And so we got 10 candidate responses from 7 different counties.
Okay. Those are always interesting to look at, candidate questionnaires.
Yeah.
All right. And audience, be sure to follow us at Better Utah on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we will see you next week, Wednesday at 12:30 for our next episode. Thanks, guys.